Hi there, and welcome to Hyundai Power Products. My name is Adrian, and today we're looking at this HYM510SPE, and specifically we're going to be changing the rear axle. And before we do this, there are two previous videos. One explains the diagnostics of the drive system, and if you follow that video through, we now know that we're going to be changing the rear axle. So it sounds a bit daunting, but I can assure you that it's not too bad if you follow this guide. Okay. So another video you'll find useful is that we're going to need to drain the engine oil and the fuel from the lawnmower. So there's another video that shows you how to do that. And I'll put links to both videos in the description below. So I take it you've watched the previous videos by now. We've drained the engine oil, we've drained the fuel, and we've got to a point where we know how to remove the blade and the belt because it's in the previous video. So I'm going to tip the mower up on its side now, remove the blade and belt very quickly, probably off camera, to get to the point where we were in the last video before we refitted the belt. And I will just stipulate again that when you tip it on its side, tip it with the air filter and carburetor on the high side. So as I tip this, I'm going to be tipping it up this way. Okay. The reason for that is that there's a crankcase breather on the engine here. If you tip it the other way, any residual oil in the engine can run out of that breather into the carburetor air box and foul up your air filter. So we don't want to do that. So this is the best way to do it, with the carburetor up. So we're at the stage where in the previous video I was just about to refit the belt. So I've stripped it down that far, taken the belt off, the pulley, the blade, the guard. That's as far as we've got. Okay, so now we're going to put the lawnmower back down onto its wheels and remove the two rear wheels. So obviously the first thing I need to do is just remove the two wheel trims. That's one that side and then one from the other side. So that's the wheel trims removed. So you could use a 13mm spanner. I just happen to have a 13mm socket, and I can remove the wheel nut. There's the wheel nut and the washer. So at this point I should be able to just take the weight off the lawnmower and pull the wheel out. Now you will notice here there's a little spring washer. We need to keep that safe as well. So I'm going to put it inside this wheel with the nut and washer. And next we need to remove this little gear here. So I've just wiped off the excess grease, and using a circlip pliers, there's a little circlip in here, so I'll just open it up and remove the little circlip. So again, I'm going to put that inside this wheel. So having removed the circlip, I can pull the little gear away, and I'm going to put that inside the same wheel. Now here you'll see a little pin that just pushes out. There's the little pin inside the same wheel, and finally the washer. So I'll put that inside the same wheel as well. So you'll see a single bolt here. We'll just undo that bolt. This holds the rear cover in position. Just loosen it a little bit more maybe. We can remove that bolt. Here we are. So I got that bolt. I'm going to put that inside the wheel, and then taking the weight off the rear of the mower, I can pull the rear cover out of the way. So all my parts from here are now placed inside the wheel. Now these gears are handed, so there's a left side and a right side. We need to keep them in the same orientation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the cover on top. I'm going to take this wheel away, and I'm going to put it on the left hand side of my workspace over there, and I know that this is the left hand wheel from the driver's position, or the operator's position of the lawnmower. So this is the left, and the other side's going to be the right. So to remove the right hand wheel, exactly the same procedure, but just keep the right and left hand wheels separate, and remember which one goes on which side. So this link bar for the height adjuster that goes from the front to the rear axle, we're going to need to remove this pin and remove the link bar. But at the moment this spring is under tension. So if I adjust the height handle to the far back, there, that will release some of the tension off the spring. Now it's a lot looser and it'll be a lot easier to get this off. So I'm just going to use a long nose pliers, hold the end and pull the R clip out of position. Okay, so now we can just remove this little bar. So that's that done. So with that done, we can tip the lawnmower back up onto its side. Just get it where you can see it. There we go. So the next thing we're going to do is to remove this little L-shaped shiny steel bracket here. So we'll start by undoing this little 10mm bolt. So I've got a socket here. Again, you could use a spanner. Oh, a little bit more. Okay, so that now allows the gearbox to spin. So now I'm going to remove the bracket completely. You could use a pair of 10mm spanners for this. I've got my 10mm socket and a 10mm spanner to hold the nut. Okay. So I'm going to keep these little bolts and bracket together. If I take this short one, I'll just put the nut back on, and you'll remember that the short one is the one with the nut on that goes through the frame, and the longer one goes into the gearbox. So now I've got a pair of 8mm spanners, and I'll just undo one of these bolts on the bottom here. I can see where I'm going, yes. Haven't quite got room here to get a socket in. So these are little nylock nuts, these. Do have to unscrew them. I can't quite get my fingers on there. You have to unscrew them pretty much the whole way off the bolt before you can get them. Yeah, that one's good. So I'll take the little nut off. I'll push the bolt out from below. I'll just put those back together. Put them to one side. And I'll move on to remove this one. Now you may find that you've got to rotate the axle with a height adjuster. There's a hole in this bracket that'll line up with that bolt. So you can get the spanner or socket normally in through the hole to undo the nut. I'll just give you a shot of that on the top side. As you can see, you've got to adjust the axle so that this hole lines up with the bolt so that you can get a socket in there. So I'm going to take these top two off as well, and I've already removed the two bottom ones. So with all four of the little bolts removed, you'll see a circlip here on the output shaft. So again, using the circlip pliers, remove the circlip. Oh dearie me. Right, okay, I have got the circlip. So, right, as you saw, the axle dropped down then. And that gives it a bit of float. Now there is a circlip on the other side as well. You can put the lawnmower down at this stage and remove the circlip, but I can actually pull the axle out now. Just getting it out from the hole. Now the height adjuster on the other side, you can remove it to do this. It does make it a little easier, but I've got a bit of a knack. I've done quite a few of these. So I've just got to put it in its bracket. There we go. And then the axle assembly can be partially removed. So I've just pulled the axle out. It did get caught on the height adjuster, on the little pin on the height adjuster, but you can just move the height adjuster out the way, right round, and the axle will come out partially out of the body. So the next thing we need to do is to remove this cable, which is the clutch cable or the drive engagement cable. So we'll show you how to do that. So we'll disengage the cable at this end to give ourselves plenty of slack, so we can pull the drive handle on the rear of the handles out of the little hole, disconnect the cable, and I'll just pop that back in its hole. And that's giving me plenty of slack now at the other end. Okay, so I can pull this cable now, plenty of slack as you see, and just unhook it from the little hole in the gearbox, and that's the cable itself released. Now we need to move on to this little plastic clip here, and I'm going to be using a long nose pliers. So it's a little bit tricky due to the limited space, but I can get my hand in through the access panel on the back, and I'm going to squeeze the two sides of this clip, and if I squeeze it just enough, it should be small enough to pass back through the hole like that. The cable will then come out, oop, you can't see now, come out through the slit in the side, and that's the cable released. Okay, so now that we've got to this stage, there's nothing holding this axle in. Just pull that cable out of my way a minute. There we go. And I should be able to just hold the mower, pull that little sub-assembly out from the rear of the mower. The next thing I'm going to do is just flick it over the other way and remove that lower circlip on the shaft here. So circlip pliers again. I'll try not to drop it this time. There we are. And there's the second circlip. So a couple of little jobs now. Bear in mind the short shaft goes opposite the height adjuster. So just bear that in mind when you come to put the new one back in. So the short shaft, there's a long shaft this side and a short shaft this side. Short shaft is away from there. So long handle, long shaft. Easy way to remember. So you've got these little plastic bearings, or plastic housings. They have got steel bearings in them. We should be able to pull the axle out, and there's the axle. Obviously you need to keep your wheel bearings. There's some bearings inside these bushings, so pull that one off. They are identical both sides, not handed. And there's the axle completely removed. So moving on, we need to assemble the new axle into position. So let's start with the bearings. So with the bearing spacing out, we'll put one on either end of the gearbox. So that's with the large part or bearing part facing outwards. So that's the first step. Okay, the second step, with the longer shaft of the gearbox on the handle side, we'll feed it through there and through there. I can push the bearings just roughly into position for the time being. One that side. And one on that side. So this is going to be a little bit fiddly, but we're going to relocate the gearbox and axle back into position. And as you can see, I've got the top part in with the plastic bushes on the outside and the bottom part in, and I can just rotate. Might need a little bit of persuasion here. Bringing this bush up to the outside of the blue deck and sliding this side into position as well. And I'll just rotate the little plastic bushes with the bearings in that we just fitted into position. So I've just lifted the axle up to reveal the second circlip groove here. So not the one on the end, the second one. And I'll replace this top circlip. So into the circlip pliers. Oops. Past the first groove into the second groove. Just missed it there. There we are. I'll push the axle back down until that circlip catches against the bearing. So we must remember to put the one on the other side a little later. So I'm going to rotate the height adjuster handle again. I'll just take the weight of the mower. Round the other side. And rotate it until I line up the hole in the plate down a bit to be able to get the two bolts down through. So okay, that's the correct orientation now. Just turn the plastic a little. So I'm going to refit these top 2 bolts and the bottom 2 bolts. So with the holes lined up now, the bolts go from the outside to the inside, with the nuts on the inside of the deck and the bolts on the outside. I'll just get that one started. I won't tighten them up at this stage, I'll just get the nuts in place to hold it all secure. Oops. That's that one. And that one. I'll do the same on the bottom. Okay, yep, so I've lined up the plastic bush again. Bolt from the outside to the in. And I'll just put the nut on loosely. So we leave them all loose until I get all 4 in position. There we are. Right, now I can go ahead and tighten up the 4 bolts. Okay, that's the 4 bolts tightened back into position. So while everything's easy to get to, I'm going to reconnect the drive cable. So I'll feed this cable back through the little slot in the casting. Just line up the end of the clip, pop it through, just making sure that the 2 wings on the plastic grommet come through well. And now I can just hook the cable back in to lock it into position. We'll go up to the handlebars and attach that end so that it doesn't come off. So much as you saw me remove it earlier, exactly the same method. We'll put it back in. Okay. And that's the cable reattached. Let's just have a look at the other end. Okay, that's working correctly. We may need to adjust it a little later. So, next job, reattach the little bracket that we removed. Okay. So put the bolt through here. With a nut on it. And just put that loosely there, and now I'll screw the bolt, excuse me, coming across. I'll screw the bolt into the gearbox part. So I'll just line up the 2 holes. And I'll get the bolt started. Get both bolts located fully first. Okay, I just want to make sure the axle's fully down because we haven't got a circlip on the other end, which it is. And I'm going to tighten the bolts. Yeah, everything's in place. I'll just nip that one. Can I get in there with a socket? Yes, I can. I need a 10mm spanner, which is here. Okay, that's that tight. Finally tighten that one. There we go. So that's the bracket back in. So we're at a point now where I need to put the mower back down, flat onto the table, so that I can replace all the wheels. So we'll do that. Okay, so we're ready to replace the wheels. I think we'll put this bracket back on first. So with the height adjuster handle set in its highest position, I should be able to just pop that bracket back on and simply push the little R-clip back into its location. So to put the wheels back on, I'm just going to make life easy for myself I'm going to pick the rear of the lawnmower up and stick it on that block of wood. And while I remember, I'm going to put the circlip on, the same as the one on this side, on the outside of the bearing, on the other side. So I'll just nip round and do that. Okay, that's that done. So, remembering that the wheels are handed, I've got the one that came off this side and it's going back on. So first thing would be the rear plastic cover. So the big hole goes over the bearing, small hole over the axle, and back in with a 10mm bolt. Just get the socket. Here we are. And that's the rear dirt cover back on. So next, just remove that circlip. We need the washer. So the washer on next. Then we need the little dowel pin. So the dowel pin in. If you wiped all the grease off this, make sure you put a little bit of grease back on. So the little flexible washer, spring washer, I'm going to put that back on the axle part. And now with the gear, with the tapered side facing in, back on to the shaft there. Back on with a little circlip for this. There we go. Let's just make sure it's in the groove. Yep, that's in. Okay. So, washer and the nut. I'll just lift the rear of the mower just a little. My block of wood isn't quite big enough. Relocate the wheel. Make sure it goes right on. Back on with the washer. And what do I need? A 13mm for this. So 13mm socket. Tighten up the wheel nut. Okay, that's nice and firm. And the final part for this side, I'll just refit the wheel trim. There we go. So I'll repeat that operation for the other side now. So yeah, I did exactly the same on the other side. Left wheel on the left, right on the right, and the wheels are now refitted. So I'm just going to flip the mower back up again. Okay, and now we're back at the exact point where we started the video. So to reassemble the belt mechanism, the pulley, the blade and the cover, if you refer back to the video on changing the belt, all the details go from this point in putting it all back together. So we must remember to check the adjustment of the drive cable, the one that fits on the gearbox, the other end. There should be just a little bit of play in there, not very much at all, maybe 6mm movement, not stupidly tight, but 6mm movement is fine. The handle still comes all the way up, so that cable's adjusted correctly. So that's it. We need to put oil back into the engine, fuel back into the engine, and we're ready to go. A brand new gearbox and axle fitted. Well, I do hope you found this demonstration useful. For more information on this or any of our other products, visit www.hyundaipowerproducts.co.uk. I've been Adrian, and thank you for watching.